Most American cars are running thinner oil than the exact same engines overseas, and it has nothing to do with protecting your engine. In fact, it's quietly costing owners thousands in repairs. If you've ever opened your owner's manual and seen 0W20, then gone online and noticed people in Europe or Japan running 5W30 in the same engine, you've probably asked yourself one question. Why would the same engine need different oil depending on where it's sold? The answer isn't engineering, it's regulations. And once you understand what's really going on, you might never look at oil recommendations the same way again. Same engine, different oil. Why? Let's take a common example. You buy a Toyota Camry in the US with the 2.5-liter four-cylinder. The manual says 0W20 only. Now someone in Europe buys the same Camry. Same engine, same internals, same design. Their manual says 5W30. This isn't just Toyota. Honda does it, Ford does it, Chevy does it. Almost every manufacturer specs thinner oil in the US than they do overseas. So what changed? Not the engine, not the climate, not the materials. What changed is government pressure. It's not climate. That's a myth. Some people claim this is about temperature. That makes no sense. The US has every climate on Earth. Alaska winters, Arizona summers, humid Florida, dry deserts, mountains, plains, everything. Europe, by comparison, is mostly moderate. So climate isn't the reason. The real reason is CAFE standards. CAFE standards. Explained simply, CAFE stands for Corporate Average Fuel Economy. These are U.S. regulations that force manufacturers to hit fuel economy targets across their entire lineup. Miss the target? They pay massive fines. So manufacturers look for every tiny efficiency gain possible. And thinner oil is one of the easiest. Thin oil creates slightly less friction. That might improve fuel economy by 1 to 2%. Sounds small, but multiplied across millions of cars, it's enough to pass regulations and avoid penalties. That's why U.S. cars get thinner oil. Europe and Japan calculate efficiency differently and prioritize emissions and durability more. They don't force manufacturers to squeeze every fraction of a mile per gallon out of oil viscosity. What thinner oil really means. Oil has two main jobs. 1. Lubricate moving parts. 2. Carry heat away. Thicker oil generally does both better, especially when hot. Yes, modern engines can run on thin oil. Tighter tolerances and better machining allow it. But surviving isn't the same as thriving. When you run 0W20, you're trading long-term protection for a tiny fuel economy gain you'll barely notice. Understanding oil viscosity, quickly. In 0W20, the MUT 0W is cold temperature flow. The MUT 20 mites is thickness at operating temperature. At full operating temp, a Rodion 20 weight oil is much thinner than a 30 weight. Most of your driving happens with the engine fully warm. That's when oil thickness matters most. And when things get hot, really hot, thin oil struggles. Heat is the real enemy. At normal operating temperature, oil is already thinner. But when you drive aggressively, sit in traffic, tow, drive in hot climates, oil temperatures can hit 230 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit or more. At those temperatures, 0W20 becomes extremely thin. Compare that to 5W30, still flows well, but maintains a stronger protective film. That difference matters, especially over time. Real-world problems with thin oil. We've already seen issues tied to ultra-thin oil. Honda 1.5 touched engines with fuel dilution, thinning oil even further. Toyota turbo engines, pushing 0W16 and showing oil pressure concerns. Ford EcoBoost. Engines with timing chain and wear issues. Thin oil doesn't cause every problem, but it removes margin. Over thousands of heat cycles, that adds up. What other markets do differently? In Europe and Japan, Honda runs 0W30 or 5W30. Toyota commonly specs 5W30. Ford often allows 5W30 or 5W40. Same engines, better protection, fewer long-term complaints. That's not a coincidence. But thicker oil can cause problems. Manufacturers will warn you, thicker oil won't flow. It hurts efficiency. It could cause wear. They're partially right. If you go too far, jumping from 0W20 to 15W50, bad idea. But going from 0W20 to 5W30, that's 1 grade thicker at operating temperature. Engines are absolutely capable of handling it, especially when those same engines use it overseas. Performance models. Tell the truth. Notice something interesting. When engines are pushed harder, manufacturers suddenly approve thicker oil. Civic Type R, thicker oil for track use. Supra, thicker oil than regular BMWs. GT350, 5W50, because heat demands it. The pattern is clear. When engines are pushed harder, they need thicker oil. And even though you might not be driving a Type R or a GT350, if you're keeping your car for a long time, driving in tough conditions, or just want maximum protection, thicker oil makes sense. The moment this all clicked for me was when I was working on a friend's car that had just hit 150,000 miles. It was a Honda Accord with the 4-cylinder engine, and he'd been religious about maintenance. Oil changes every 5,000 miles with the specified 0W20 oil, never missing one. But the engine was burning oil. Not a crazy amount, but enough that he was adding a quart every 1,500 miles or so. I pulled the valve cover off to check the condition of the valve train, and what I saw surprised me. There was sludge buildup on some of the components, and the metal surfaces showed more wear than I expected for an engine with good maintenance history. The thin oil had done its job keeping the engine running, but it hadn't done a great job protecting it over the long term. We flushed the engine, cleaned everything up, and I convinced him to switch to 5W30. Within a couple thousand miles, the oil consumption dropped significantly. The engine ran quieter. The oil stayed cleaner between changes. This was the same oil weight that Honda specified for that engine in Japan, so I knew the engine could handle it fine. That experience made me realize that while 0W20 might be fine for getting through a warranty period, it's not ideal for long-term durability. The manufacturers know this, but they're more concerned about meeting government fuel economy standards than they are about your engine lasting 300,000 miles. So here's the bottom line. The reason US cars use 0W20 while the same engines abroad use 5W30 comes down to CAFE standards and fuel economy regulations. The US government puts enormous pressure on manufacturers to squeeze out every last bit of fuel economy. And thinner oil is an easy way to gain 1 or 2% better mileage. European and Asian markets have different regulations, so manufacturers can spec thicker oil that protects the engine better without worrying as much about fuel economy penalties. It's that simple. It's not about climate, it's not about driving conditions, it's about what the government requires and what manufacturers can get away with.